Well, Bill Adams, he always advertises the oldest nursery in the state. His father started a citrus nursery, and Bill actually went to Georgia Tech, I think, and got a degree in engineering, which kind of led to him advancing nursery equipment that could better dig trees, and also he was really the father of the container nursery industry, and this was back in the 70s, and he even developed his own citrus container, because in the container industry they started out using these bags, these little black bags, and the black bags were problematic because they wouldn't stand up on their own, and it's hard to fill them up, and they're not rigid. You got these bags flopping all around. You're putting potting soil in them, and so anyway, Bill Adams, he developed a container, and they call it the Adams Citropot, and it was a 4-inch Citropot. And why he made it where the container was not completely square, because it tapered. It started out at 4 inches up top, and it was like a 14-inch long, tall container, and it tapered from 4 inches down to 3.5. Well, anything that's tall up or wide up top and small on the bottom is not going to stand up on its own. So guess what? You had to develop a table that had 2 layers of wire, one to hold the weight of the container, the bottom wire, which is usually like a 1 by 2 inch wire. Then the top wire was a 4 by 4 wire that held the 4 by 4 container intact. So, he developed that, and that was the starting age of the container industry, was back in the late 70s.
So Bill actually had the first citrus indoor nursery and container business going.
Yes, he did. And there was several nurseries that followed suit behind him, because we had the freezes, and the outdoor bare root nurseries are always contending with the elements, not just freeze, but you'd have pest issues, you had the burr nematode issues. The trade-off was the ground is free, so you didn't have all this overhead of a container and a greenhouse and potting soil and benches. And of course, in a greenhouse, you heard of the greenhouse effect. It's a lot warmer in the greenhouse than it is out in the outdoors, except maybe the summertime. All bets are off. But that's kind of how it developed. They wanted something that was also more user-friendly. Because see, a bare root tree, when it's dug out of the ground, it generally has to be planted within a day or 2 days at the most. I mean, you maybe could hold them in 3 days, but they go through a transplanting shock as well. And everyone's heard of the dog days. Well, the dog days for citrus nurseries is when they dig those trees out, they go through a transplanting shock, and when it's really hot in the summertime, it's a lot of added stress on the trees.
What was it? Was there a major effort to convince growers that to move from planting a 3/4 inch diameter tree to a 1/4 inch diameter tree?
Well, yeah, the old school bigger is always better. So they always wanted a larger tree because in their mind it would get established and it would bear fruit quicker. But that's really a little bit of a wise tale, and the reason why is you're going back to the transplant shock. The bigger the tree is, the harder it is for it to get established certain times of the year. A lot of growers would plant in spring or in the fall or winter, because in the summertime, the dog days are really, the heat's just a lot of added stress, and of course they incurred more losses. So that's what kind of led to the container business as well. Was doing that.
Well, nowadays you have no choice. Is that right, Phil?
Now you don't. Back in January 1st of 2008, the USDA and the Department of Ag, they enacted a rule where all trees have to be in enclosed psyllid-proof structures, and it's pretty much across the whole U.S. now. But Florida was the first one that had to do that because we had the Asian citrus psyllid come in on us.
Now, when you're forced to go to the greenhouse situation, obviously, like you said, land was plentiful when we first started field grown nurseries. What kind of an investment does a citrus nurseryman have to get into the business now?
There's a lot of things that needs to be to do to start a citrus nursery today. First of all, you got to have the knowledge of how to propagate a tree. because you grow large citrus trees and grow the fruit as a production manager, it's really a whole different entity of being a citrus nursery. It's not like production, and it's literally more intense farming is what it amounts to, because a nursery, that's why I call it a nursery, it requires more care, more frequent care, and it's not one of those where you just can wait till next week to do it. There's times you got daily care that has to be taken care of. So, but to answer your question on the citrus nursery, you have to have a knowledge of structures, and also in locations. Certain locations require heating. Like if you're in a colder climate, you require extra heating. That's an added cost. And just overall designing the tables and how they fit in a structure, and the irrigation. There's several different types of irrigation, but with water becoming an issue, you have to be more equipped to have water conservation efforts of maybe a drip irrigation or aquamats or some type of sub-irrigation has to be used today. So it's ever changing.
Well, citrus nurseries were located in what is now the northern part of the citrus zone, probably up into the 70s anyway, before the freezes of the 80s. Well, today, where are we growing citrus trees? Where are the nurseries now? Have they moved all south? Are they scattered all over the state? What's the situation now?
Well, there's several schools of thoughts on where nurseries should be at. Some growers have selected to have the nurseries outside of the citrus growing region, which is in northern Florida, in the Gainesville area, the Panhandle area, because there's a lot less disease pressure and pest issues as well, a lot less pests. But it's the logistics as well. It costs a lot of money to travel to deliver them. Growers want them first thing in the morning. So in most of the citrus areas in Central Florida and South Florida, so most of the nurseries have selected to still stay down in the industry. And they were actually allowed to, if you had an existing citrus nursery in 2008, you were allowed to keep the existing site, but it had to be in an enclosed, psyllid-proof structure.
Well, we talked to some nurserymen who had been in the business for a long time, and early on, you could grow a little old patch of trees anywhere, and a lot of growers grew their own trees. 4-H'ers grew their trees, and there were literally trees in backyards and so forth. Well, in today's situation, how many nurseries do we have? Have we really consolidated down to just a few nurseries that are growing the trees?
Yeah, I mean, that was back in the good old days. We had over 1,000 citrus nurseries back in the 60s and 70s. And just through pest issues and from the freezes that we had, the industry's downsized to where today there's probably about 45 nurseries today. So it's a lot smaller than what it used to be, from over 1,000 down to 45 or 50 today.
Let's talk a little bit about the regulations that are involved, and what was your experience early on with the Budwood registration program? Was that something that was readily accepted by the growers and hard to implement and so forth, or what's the take on the Budwood program?
Well, the Budwood program has a long history. It started back in the late 50s, early 60s, and they developed what they called the Budwood Bureau, which is a division of the Department of Division of Plant Industry. So that was developed because of some diseases we had, like cirrhosis, some old citrus diseases that we have had for years and years, probably 70, 80 years. And so it originally was developed to take care of viroids and viruses like cirrhosis and exocortis. But as we got new diseases, it became apparent that we needed to do a little better job and modify the department division of plant industry, modify the Bureau of Budwood registration to make it, instead of a voluntary program, make it mandatory, because there was still a lot of disease issues that were popping up, you know, in the 80s, and everyone was under the impression that the Budwood program was not supposed to allow that, but what they had forgotten was it was a voluntary program. So in 1997, they did a rule modification and made the rule where it was mandatory that all nursery trees grown in the state had to be grown from budwood sources that were tested every year, particularly for Tristasia virus, but it was tested for all the diseases to make sure it was mandated that they would be disease-free.
You know, I remember early on that you could either buy a registered tree or a certified tree, and sometimes growers confused that they're one and the same. But if I remember correctly, if you wanted to get a tree that you knew was nematode-free, basically, you got a certified tree, and that was all the nurseryman was guaranteeing you really was, that it was nematode-free, and I don't even know if it was guaranteed to be virus-free. But if you bought a registered tree, that meant that the nurseryman had the inspectors there to make sure that if you were buying a Hamlin on sour, that's what you were getting, and that it was virus-free. And so that then moves to the fact that you have no choice now. Every tree in the state of Florida has to be registered.
Well, they're all registered and certified, and certification refers to the trees being tested for nematodes. And I think it was mandatory that they all had to be certified, but it was not mandatory they all had to be registered. So some people got them confused, thought they were one and the same, but you're right, certification was for nematode certification, and then the registration was for viroids and viruses. So they eventually combined it in '97 and said, all right, they're all going to be called registered. So the certification was a mandatory already, so the registration of budwood sources being free of viroids and viruses, that was mandated as well to be registered in '97.
The Hall of Fame is doing this oral histories, and we want to talk a little bit about some characters in the industry. You've mentioned Bill Adams. Tell us a little bit about Franklin Ward. He's a member of the Citrus Hall of Fame, and Franklin was a unique individual, a rather remarkable individual, and he had a lot to do with canker and the Nursery Association and everything else. Little recollections of Franklin Ward.
Well, Franklin Ward was a steward of the industry and one of the fathers of the citrus nursery industry the way it is today. He actually was one of the founding fathers of the Florida Citrus Nurserymen's Association, SCNA. And he also was one of the I think he had the very first registered budwood citrus tree block. So, so he shared that material with other nurserymen because he wanted to be a steward of clean material, and he promoted it, and he encouraged other nurserymen to use registered material. And he was actually the very first one that had the registered material, and then of course others followed suit. So he made a lot of improvements to the industry to where we're at today, just in the association and then also through the registered clean material.
Well, Franklin was a man of high character. He's the only person that I remember that refused his nomination to the Citrus Hall of Fame, and he somehow felt that he was responsible for the canker situation, and I think we finally now have him in the Hall of Fame. But that was a rather difficult time for nurserymen when canker was found in the nurseries, and you had to go through all the eradication, and then eventually it was determined that it really wasn't canker after all, and we now call it citrus bacterial spot. What was it like during that time period, Philip, to have a nursery and to deal with the canker regulations and deal with all that turmoil that was going on?
Well, back in the 80s, probably one of the worst periods to be a citrus nurseryman. That's when we had, at the time they thought it was the Asiatic citrus canker, and unfortunately Mr. Ward was the first nursery to have it, but there were several others that followed suit. And this is before they had DNA testing, so they couldn't confirm through the lab really if it was Asiatic canker or not. There's several different bacterias that are in the family of the canker, so that they finally, the prognosis was it was a bacterial leaf spot. And it was a disease commonly found in citrus nurseries because the trees were pushed with high rates of nitrogen because there are a lot of trees in a small area, so they required a lot more fertilizer care. And usually when you gave the trees that much of a higher fertilization program, it resulted in a more susceptibility to bacteria spot. And it's just something that was a crisis at the time, and it was a lot of uncertainty in the nursery business. We all pulled together as a group and worked through it, and then of course we found out later, thank goodness, that it was not the Asiatic canker. It was a bacterial leaf spot.
But you were, do you lose any trees that they pushed out any part of your nursery?
No, that's how I got into citrus nursery business. Was I worked for Bill Becker in Fort Pierce on the Indian River, and at the time when I went to work with Bill, I thought I was going to be in production, but because of the crisis and all the trees that were removed because of the bacterial leaf spot, they actually post-dated and went back and pulled trees from those infected nurseries that had the trees been planted in the ground and the grows for at least 6 months. They still had to be removed as well. So Bill lost over 100,000 trees, and he was highly upset because there was no direction whether it was going to be compensated or not. So it was a taking, and of course you had nothing returned. So he took control of his own destiny and practically made me be a citrus nurseryman, so whether I wanted to or not. So that's kind of how I got into it. So, but probably was the best thing that happened to me. Things happen for reasons, and so I owe a lot to Mr. Becker because he provided all the tools and the financing for me to be educated in the nursery business.
Phillip, we tried to deal with burring nematode and citrus canker through regulations and putting in barriers and pushing out trees, and then we went to a massive seek and destroy program with citrus canker, and it seemed like that those programs in and of themselves were only a stopgap effort and really weren't that successful in spite of all the efforts that we did. But with the advent of greening, has the philosophy changed now? We're not in a seek and destroy. We've kind of gone the other direction. Rather than regulating ourselves out of a problem, we're looking at trying to research ourselves out of a problem.
Well, we are. With the barriers that they had with the nematodes, that was some early lessons on controlling pests. But now it's gotten to where, with the free trade opening up, it's allowed to where we've been inundated with pests and diseases. It seems like every couple of years there's a new pest. And of course, the pest generally brings in a disease. So it's forced us to just to be micromanagers of a citrus nursery now. I mean, who would ever thought we'd have screened-in enclosures of growing citrus trees? In the good old days, you could have a small block provide for your grove in your backyard, but because of all the issues that we've had, things have changed. So, it's forced us to be better managers to where that tree now has become a lot more valuable than it was even just 20 years ago.
I want to shift a little bit how things have changed. You talk about all the nitrogen that you put on there now. How has the cultural practices changed dramatically with growing the trees? Are you all liquid fertilizer versus dry, and some of these other things that are taking place in the nutrition program?
Well, that's a good question. We have, we've have to become more efficient and have fertilizer sources that are more efficiently utilized by the citrus tree, especially young trees, because we grow a lot of trees in a small area. So it works out to about 3 to 4 trees per square foot, which is a lot of trees. If you look at an acre in a greenhouse, generally you'll have over 100,000 trees in that 1 acre area. So that requires a lot more fertilization, but with the best management practices, the BMPs, that's forced us to be better managers in utilizing the fertilizer so it doesn't show up in our groundwater. So now we have contamination issues we have to deal with besides pests and diseases. But it's all good for the environment because most farmers are environmentally friendly, and we have to keep utilizing land over and over. So we can't jeopardize losing that property because of some type of contamination. So yes, the liquid fertilizer is more efficient. Dry can still be used, but we have to use materials that the trees take up quite readily, so it doesn't show up in our groundwater.
What about the actual propagation? We talked with some of the nurseries in the early days. They were telling us that the budder would go in there and brush the dirt away from the tree and bud it almost on the ground. And they were talking about some of the reasons that they had to bud it that close to the ground. Have you changed now? How high do you bud the trees? How small are they? Who does the budding? Do you have your own budders? Do you have contract budders? And how fast do they go? These are kind of things. Talk about how you actually propagate the tree.
Well, budding, first of all, it's an art, and not everybody can bud a citrus tree, and it's generally they're unique individuals, and they have a job to do, and most of them do a really good job, and it's all about timing, and it's also about getting being organized and going in and doing a job quickly. But years ago, they used to bud them low to the ground for a couple reasons. First of all, I guess it's a lot easier to slip it on the ground, but also to put a bud in. But also they could bank some dirt up on those trees to protect that bud, from a freeze, in a bare root situation. But we found out that there's a fungus called Phytophthora that's in the soil naturally, and it can infect that bud union if it's close to the ground. So what happens is that wound where the bud union's at, the fungus can get into that wound and it can affect the tree, and sometimes it can even kill the tree. So just from best management practices in the nursery industry, we evolved into budding trees a little higher up. So now the height of a budding on a tree is usually 4 to 6 inches.
Well, obviously, you're in the business to make money, and if you have to grow a tree for another 8 months in order to get the bud at a foot off the ground, you're going to have to sell it for more money. And my experience was that growers didn't want to pay any more than they absolutely had to for a tree. And so one reason you budded them low too, you could bud the tree much quicker than having to wait for it to get some caliper on the top.
Right. Well, that's another reason why they did that. But things have changed, and we don't have that luxury of doing that anymore. So
now most all your budding is what I guess used to be called micro budding. The buds are much smaller now than you used to put in those trees.
yeah, they were, because they grew bigger liners. Of course, they had bigger trees. Everything was bigger and better back then. But today it's just become streamlined to where it's got to be efficient, and it's a smaller bud. It's a smaller liner we bud, and the trees are smaller that we send out. But like I say, they're containerized, so the grower, when he gets these trees today, there's a lot better chance that the trees have a better take and better survival and planting, and they take off a lot quicker for the grower because of this.
What's probably your biggest challenge in trying to grow a nursery tree?
The biggest challenge, I don't know if there's one major challenge. There's a couple of them. Labor's a big challenge because in the greenhouses it's a very hot environment, and it's a lot of hand-oriented work, just like with budding. So they have to be in an environment where it's uncomfortable, and they have a lot of handwork that's got to be done, which most of the time women are a little better for doing that
Meticulous work.
meticulous hand labor, we'll call it. So, but you know, you got men to do it as well, but make sure we got equal rights. So anyway, but that's what it's evolved to. Is it's and it's also just having the proper equipment and the safety. Safety is really important now because you know, we're in a society now where everybody sues for one reason or another. So we have to be conscientious about the safety and for the employees, and make sure also with the insecticides that we still use, there's no contamination issues, and we got re-entry periods. So a lot of that has changed from the way it used to be.
I'm interested in your marketing strategy now. We talked to Ray Kemp, for example, and he said, well, I just knew who my buyers were, who the growers were, and that how many trees they usually had for replacement, and just kind of grew them. But you just can't grow trees now and just wait for people to walk in the door and buy them. Are all your trees contract produced?
Yes, we have to, because when we get financing from a bank, they want to have a guarantee they're going to get paid. So we, in essence, have to have a guarantee that we're getting the trees guaranteed a sale. So, of course, most of us have to get a line of credit from the bank. So that's probably one of the biggest changes as well. Is growers are forced now to pre-order trees a year ahead of time, which is difficult because they haven't even taken out the trees that they're going to replace yet. So it's hard for them to sometimes get an exact number. But you know, in the nursery business, we grow a gross number of trees to meet the net number that's contracted. So generally, we'll have extra trees. Now they're not always on time, of course, because of other issues. But that's where it's really, we've been forced to have to contract trees. So you can't take anything for granted anymore. You know, and don't expect the grower to pick up the phone and call you. The nurseryman's now forced to be a salesman as well, to go call on the grower to make sure we meet his needs, because with the changing rootstocks and varieties we're having now, you have to stay on top of that as well. I'll take this out. Sorry about that. No, it was mine. I heard it do it twice. Sorry about that.
There are a lot of colorful growers in the industry we heard a story yesterday about a grower that when he got trees from the nurseryman, the first thing he did was pull every leaf off of them, and he planted that bare root tree without a single leaf on there. But share with us maybe some of the more interesting growers you've had, and any unusual requests that you get as far as trees are concerned.
Well, there's always one that gets you off guard on an unusual request. A lot of them still live back in the bare root days, so they haven't made that adjustment to a container tree. And container trees are completely different from a bare root. In other words, when you plant a container tree, and when you remove it to plant it out in a grove, to transplant it, you generally need to take at least half the potting media off that tree, because in essence you're making that tree adapt to the new soil type that's being planted. So we always ask the grower to break up the potting media that comes out of the container and not use it all, because it'll generally dry out and it's real hard to re-wet it. And plus you want the tree to be adapted to the new soil it's being planted in. So that's been a major transition that the growers had to adapt to. And of course they still need to be mudded in like a bare root tree does. But as far as varieties and in essence to tree requests, that changes all the time, and it's like a ever-changing puzzle from year to year. So we've had growers that wanted all the leaves removed off the trees, particularly if they're going into an area where there might be some citrus canker. So there has been some unusual requests. Now, whether those procedures work or not, I don't really know.
But nothing, you're not going to share with me some of the wild stories that you get, huh?
Well, there's so many of them. I don't know if I want to get into it because I might forget somebody. So.
You don't have a favorite?
I got a couple of favorites, but
We, if we're rambling around, I'm sorry, but, you know, you helped us when we did the video for Dr. Pravat, and we were just really impressed with all the students and that respected Dr. Pravat. And he passed away this year. I know it's going to be a big loss to the industry, but how critical was your training at Southern and Dr. Pravat and the fellow students that you had? Are you still in contact with them and everything?
yeah, it was very important. It's probably one of those parts of your life that you look back on that's really relevant later. You don't always realize it when you're younger, but Dr. Pravat, he was important in us working together as teams, and also staying in contact when we got out of school and got our jobs out in the industry, because you never knew when you needed some help. But I think what he practiced the most is to be practical, and he had a lot of practical experience as a professor, because he worked out in the citrus industry before he was a professor, and he shared that with us. And you know, today the transition's gone to Dr. Manners, and he was there as well. And I think he got training from Dr. Pravat to where he's at today as well. So it was a big influence on all of us.
Do you have any other mentors in the industry that you?
Yeah, you mentioned Pravat and Bill Becker. Who was your go-to guy when you had a question about the nursery?
Well, my go-to guys when I was in a nursery, because I started in a nursery business without really any formal training, and really the only education I had was from school, which was limited because I never really expected to be a citrus nurseman. So when we went on citrus nursery tours with Dr. Pravat to visit nurseries, I didn't really pay much attention to it because I never thought I'd be doing it. So just to give some advice to these students today is, whenever you go on these field trips, make sure you pay attention to everything, because you never know where you end up being at. So whether it's a packing house or a processing plant or you know, the nurseries, I never really paid much attention to it, and didn't really think it was that big of a entity. But it turned out to be a lot more intense than I ever expected. So I usually would go to, when I started out, and I even told Mr. Becker this, I said, I don't know much about the nursery business. And he said, well, that's probably a good thing. You won't have any developed bad habits. So you can kind of get on the cutting edge and learn from the start here. So I visited existing nursemen like Bill Adams and Cliff Gaddis. He worked with Minute Maid at the time, and then he went with Hickory Branch. And Cliff was a bare root nurseman that actually worked for Bill Adams at one time as well. And so it's kind of like a fraternity of these nursemen. They all at one time or another work with each other. And so I called on some of those veteran nursemen to give me some advice and direction. Of course, you have to be careful because they're competitors as well. So it was, I guess you could say it was advice they'd give you that was guarded advice, because you didn't want to give away too many trade secrets.
What's been probably the most rewarding part, not financially, but otherwise, with being in the nursery business?
You know, probably the most rewarding factor is just a fellowship with growers and other nurserymen. We've gotten to become a smaller group, a smaller industry, but I think we've all pulled together and just sharing stories and experiences with these growers. And a lot of times you pick up a lot out in the field because growers have developed a new technique of growing the trees off a little better and faster and better. So because of that, that fellowship is very important, and that's just a relationship in this business that's probably the most important thing that's we've had.
Greening obviously is dominating the industry now. It has to be of concern to you as a nurseryman that survival of the industry means survival of your business. How optimistic or pessimistic are you with regard to the greening issue?
Well, I think I probably have it bred into me. I'm just naturally an optimistic person. And then you have to be that way. You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to believe in the industry. And the industry's been here, seems like forever. You know, the Spanish brought citrus in back in the 1500s, so we were the first citrus producing state in the United States, and we've been around forever. And I just can't see an industry going away. We're just going to have to adapt and make some changes to these diseases as they come in. HLB has probably been one of the most serious ones, but I really think we're working our way through it. We're having better varieties and rootstocks that are being developed, and genetically I think we'll have an answer there in time as well. As far as controlling the pests, we've gotten better at it as well, to lessen the disease pressure and spread. But also there's trees that exist out in the industry. It could be 100 or 200 years old that have natural HLB tolerance or resistance, and so there's an effort being made to locate those trees that we call escape trees. So we're working with that as well. So we're turning every stone we can to be in a survival mode.
Are orders about the same, or have you seen a dramatic drop off in the demand for trees, or are people enough the ones who abandon it? There's to compensate for that. There are those who are trying to just plant their way through the problem.
Well, most growers are planting their way through the problem, addressing the survival of the disease. There has been some that selected to take a conservative approach and not plant until something better comes out. But what they don't realize is as time goes on, you still lose trees to HLB, and your production will eventually go to the point where it passes your returns. So you can't afford not to sit back and do anything. So we encourage growers to stay up with the better varieties that seem to have tolerance, to plant it, because it affects your bottom line eventually as you keep losing trees every year.
Well, that's interesting. I'm not in it as much as I used to be, but why would a grower want to plant a huge Nuceller Valencia on Swingle when they know that that combination is, pretty susceptible to the greening, when there are other selections of Valencias out there and other rootstocks that seem to have some degree of tolerance? Are many growers moving in this new direction, or are we still headstrong and want to plant the ones that we've had before?
Well, they've had a history of the ones they've had before, and they've got confidence in them and the production they've had. So sometimes making a change that dramatic to another clone of that variety is hard because there's some uncertainty, and you're not sure how well it'll actually survive as well. So you kind of go back to an experience mod of what you had. And I think with the pest control, what's gotten better that we've developed with the HLB, I think the Nuceller Valencias on Swingle still would be a good combination. I mean, I still have growers in South Florida, down in Southwest Florida particularly, that were part of the CHEMA program that kept the pesticide applications in a better controlled environment and on a schedule to where those trees still produce very well today.
Well, I drive by Lake Yale every once in a while, and it's nice to see that you've planted some trees for Mr. Allison up there where Eichelberger grows were. So even people in the northern part of the state some of them are optimistic. We'll see how it goes, but it's going to be an interesting situation to see where we end up with HLB after dealing with all these other issues that we've gone through. Any observations you might want to leave us with as far as the citrus nursery business is concerned, or the regulations? You're an excellent example of someone who gives back to the industry. You've been chairman of the Budwood Technical Committee for a long time. You're actually involved in the Nurserymen's Association and so forth. Any last parting comments?
Well, the industry's been really good to me, and it's developed a lot of relationships and even partnerships at time, and still converse with a lot of of my friends that were students, colleagues, and it's just it's a good relationship to continue, good business relationship. So we just have to work through this. I think the citrus growers and nurserymen are resilient and dedicated, and I think we'll be fine. We just have to make changes as we go. It's like anything in life, you have to modify and change, and that's just part of surviving in life. And I think as an industry, we'll continue to progress and get better.
You know, it's kind of interesting. I believe you're growing peach trees, right?
Yeah, we've actually diversified into growing peach trees. Never thought we'd do that, but University of Florida's developed low chill peaches that actually can set a crop in Florida conditions. Because we've always suffered not having the cool weather that we needed, but now they've got peaches that don't require as much cool weather to set a crop. So we're doing that, and we're growing some eucalyptus trees, maybe to serve the pulp industry. So not that we've given up on citrus, but sometimes the banks, they encourage you to be diversified, so we listen to some of their advice.
Well, it's interesting because John Kaufman at Grand Island Nurseries up there did the same thing about 60 years ago. So they started growing some peaches and pears and apples and other deciduous fruits, but as well as the citrus. So with that, we'll wind it down unless you've got anything else to say.
I'm sure I do, I just can't remember what to say.
Well, it's 10:15, so I know you've got an 11 o'clock appointment.
Okay.
Thank you so much for doing
You did a lot.